I want to address you a bit because I want to congratulate you in person for such a great work you did with the protection of the social work title. And this is a long process, a long journey you had. In 1996, Austria had a conference in Linz. And in that conference in 1996, you discussed the profile of social work long time ago. And then in 1997, I think you know the history better than me, but you know, I go to such an effort you had. 1997, there was the first law drafted for the social work profession in Austria. And at the time, the president of OBDS, it was Herbert, and Herbert and Judith, the time she was the secretary of OBDS, they start to promote this idea of having a law in all the province of Austria, because it is a decision that is going to be taken at the province level. And at the time, 4 provinces said yes to the law for social workers. And, you know, you always in OBDS did good design for the conferences. Herbert has the t-shirt with the conference in 1996. Yes. So later on so I think that's why I want to address, because I think this is also a celebration for you, because 20 years ago in 2004, another conference was here in Salzburg. I think you call it, if I don't say it correctly, Sozialarbeitsbezeichnungsgesetz. This was the name of the conference at the time. And 20 years ago, you discuss about how important it is and it's right to have a law for social work. And it's also the necessity. You were still discussing 20 years ago about how important it is that social workers, they have a law. After this 20 years, today, you have this celebration again in Salzburg. But this time you have the law, you have the protection of title. So congratulations for all this journey. Really a lesson for all of us to learn from you, from your hard effort and positive stubbornness. You need a law, you want a law. And for all this, congratulations. It's really an achievement. And now I pass to Ruth, the president of IFSW Europe. Ruth, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is like a bit of a ceremonial handing from one president to the next, actually. It's my first public speech, I think, since becoming president of IFSW Europe in April this year. So yeah, I'm Ruth Allen. I am, in my day job, the Chief Executive of the British Association of Social Workers, a role I've had for 8 years. And I've been involved with IFSW for a long time, particularly in the last few years, working in the British Association, representing UK in IFSW and being on the executive committee. So I'm delighted to be addressing you in this role, and I am getting used to it. I'm finding out what it means to be the president. So I'll come back and tell you in a year's time. So I'm here really I want to know more about what your priorities are to learn from your conference. I don't speak any German, and I'm really sorry for that. So it's difficult for me in that regard. So, but I hope that one of the things IFSW is all about is overcoming barriers of place and nationality and culture and language. So I hope you can have opportunities to learn, and I will be here. I hope to be here for part of tomorrow as well. And Julia, Julia's there, who liaised with me about coming, and I said, what should I talk about? Because there is so much to say. So I want to talk a little bit more about IFSW in broad terms, just so we know, perhaps together, what is important about IFSW. I'm going to talk a bit about the political situation that you have here in Austria and that we have across Europe and indeed across the world, and the challenges of that for us in social work and how we must pull together in that context, and a little bit more about your new law. And Julia asked me to share a little bit about our experience in the UK. I could go on for a long time and I won't, but I'll just a little bit about how having protection of title, but also a statutory regulator in the UK has impacted things. I'll just say a few things, and then I hope we will have a little bit of time to talk. So, yeah, so I'll move on. It's always been important in all contexts for social workers to share knowledge, mutual support, peer support. Social worker to social worker support is a huge part of social work. And IFSW is really about doing that at international and cross-border level. Something I've always felt was so important. It's about being internationalist as social workers and sometimes taking that opportunity to look up at what is happening in other places and get ourselves out of our immediate situation and maybe take some inspiration from colleagues elsewhere. In my practice as a social worker, as a social work leader, different jobs I've had, that's always been very important to me. It is inspiring to know we are part of a global profession. And of course, within Europe, we have a very well structured and organized region. Thanks very much to Anna's leadership over the past years, and I hope to continue that. So we share our ethics and values. We have a global set of principles for ethics, and I'm very interested in your new ethical statement. And I know that is the theme of the conference. Social justice, human and social rights, poverty, anti-discrimination, supporting people to thrive, not just survive, enabling people to live the lives they want to live. And of course, increasingly addressing the threats of climate and environmental justice are all part of modern social work and part of our challenge as a global profession. And this is something that IFSW is working on with our work on eco-social work and an eco-social world. And we celebrate these things through the World Social Work Day. I'm sure you celebrate it here. We have the theme that we have from the global agenda. This year and last year, it's Buen Vivir, that Latin American inspired idea of living and working in a more holistic, interdependent way of being in communities, including the environment and just better ways of living. And we take inspiration from those global ideas, as well as regional ideas, as well as our national ideas. And for me, that's what IFSW is all about. So to move on to my second theme, in many ways, these ideals and these important ideas are under some threat, considerable threat in Europe and beyond, with the rise of far-right political parties that are gaining ground and becoming dominant. I understand the rise of the Freedom Party, I've got that right here, is of great concern, looking likely it may do very well in both the Austrian and the European elections. And I mean, Austria is just one of many nations in Europe and elsewhere where nationalistic, divisive and discriminatory politics is gaining dominance, it's gaining great support. We see similar in France, Germany, Hungary, other countries. And so at a European level, this is a great risk. And this is why it's important that we are organized as social workers at European level as well as global level, because we are facing some similar threat. Even in the UK, we have all sorts of really difficult and ugly discourse between with far right ideas kind of being used in all sorts of horrendous political ways. So, in fact, my association took a motion to the IFSW global meeting in April about exactly this, about the importance, and it was voted on, and our colleagues voted for it across the globe, where we laid out the major political, social, economic, and environmental threats that we all face at global and local levels, and identified some actions for us as social workers at global level, acting in solidarity across associations, working with other global partners, because social work can't solve these things alone. We have to work with our partners in other professions, with other global bodies, and how important it is to work together in these challenging times, to hold on to hope and to be optimistic and confident and strong that together we can make a difference and turn the tide, because political flavors, they do come and go. We've had this before, and we have to look at how we get out of this rise of the right and move beyond that. We shouldn't give up hope that we can't turn that around. We're hoping for a change of government in the UK on the 4th of July. Yay. Yeah, it's not the most radical option. However, it's not what we've had for the last 14 years. And, you know, change is important. So we're hoping to have that. So we certainly need to share our strategies, I think, as associations. What are we doing in the different countries? What different campaigns are we doing in different countries? How are we lobbying politicians? How are we having influence in the parliaments across Europe? We can talk about those things when we come together globally, and in the region, as well as obviously working together as an association at nation level. And that's something that really motivates me and I find very exciting and very supportive. When I'm in my role in my UK association, we're having some argument about some thing, and I think about the big picture, the big collaborations and the big ideas that we can share at a wider level. It's inspiring. So I do think it's important that we use some of the structures that we have in Europe. We are in some ways quite lucky. We have, you know, the EU is far from perfect, but it's an important structure, not for us anymore, but, you know, I do have residency in France, so I just want you to know that. So I do have still have a vested interest. The Council of Europe, the home of the European Court of Human Rights and the European Convention on Human Rights and the Istanbul Convention and many other conventions that shape our practice, where still 46 countries, even those countries which are getting more influenced by the right, they're still members. The debates are still going on there. They're still engaging the ministers in what human rights, and democracy and rule of law looks like. And we should remember that and use that. So we need to stay positive and hopeful, take strength from each other, from our colleagues here, across the region, around the world, and believe that social work really can make a change in people's lives. I'm going to move on now to talk about your new law, which has been it took a long time, but these things do sometimes the best things take a long time. So congratulations. And I know that it has been long and hard fought for. Regulation and protection of title or no protection of title is different. I'm looking at my arc here. It's different all over the world, you know, different. And the way in which we do it in the UK is different to the law that you have here, for instance. There are real advantages in having protection of title, and you have obviously thought about this very, very carefully in order to go in that direction. And I'm imagining that the status and the recognition is hugely important here to have that influence that we want to have on the policymakers, but for the political reasons and for the practice reasons that we've been talking about. It is a necessary step really for further professionalisation and for status. In the UK, just as a comparison, and then maybe we could have a bit of discussion if people want to talk about it. We've had protection of title and also a state regulator of social work across the UK since 2003. We have 4 regulators, 1 for each country in the UK, England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. They all do it slightly differently. But it is a criminal offence now to call yourself a social worker if you don't have both the qualification and the registration with the state body. And I don't think you have that. You're not having that bit, no. We have a regulator which is half independent and half government, really. It's not truly independent. And I know you don't have this, but if you ever were going in that direction of having a state regulator, you have to think about how much government can then potentially control what social work is and what social workers learn. It's not a huge issue in the UK. It's a little occasional kind of thing that we have some debates with the regulators about, because they do share, people who run them share common values. But the importance of having an independent organisation run by and for social workers that is not connected with the state machinery, that is not representing government, is so important. And we feel that very strongly in the UK. So we have a dynamic relationship with the regulatory bodies that register social workers. And our association has always supported regulation, actually. That's been our policy, and protection of titles. So we wanted that. I think protection of title is probably, in some ways, is particularly useful if you also have protected roles and tasks for social workers. And I don't know if you have that here. We don't have that many in the UK, actually, where it actually says in legislation, statute, or statutory instruments, this must be done by a social worker. That's an interesting thing to look at, is because some countries have that much more than certainly we do in the UK. One of the other things you'd have to be a bit careful about is if funders are taking money out of social services and social work, if having protected title social workers with requirements maybe to keep the protection of title, I don't know, they may become more expensive, and the employers may not want to employ so many of them, and they may want to move towards using other skilled staff. So these are the sorts of things I think you have to be careful about. And the other thing is to make sure it doesn't separate you from colleagues who work in other fields close to social work, but maybe without the formal qualification, so that the status doesn't become a problem rather than a help. So you know, that sort of division from people who work in social care, people who work in charities and so on, without the formal qualification. So I just thought I'd share those few little reflections, but I do think that it seems in the current situation that you have, and I know there's a lot of fear about where the politics is going and whether or not there will be less investment in social services, what support will there be for social workers and the important work you do. Being able to articulate that really strongly is so important, and having protection of title at this point in time is obviously probably a very important thing for the profession here. So I'm going to stop there and just say that it's been a delight to talk to you and to see your faces, and I will be very happy to come back again. This is only my second visit to Austria, so I've got lots more to see. But the last time actually I was in Austria was in the fantastic conference that was organised in 2019 in Vienna, which was organised by the association at fairly short notice, and it was a really great event just before we all went home for COVID. Anyway, it was very good. So thank you very much. Thank you, and have a great rest of conference.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you for your statements and for the perspective of the European perspective and also the British perspective. So we have the possibility now to a few questions. If you want to ask Ruth something about the law, the registration, the protection in UK or in the European states, you can do it now. Es gibt auch die Möglichkeit, die Fragen auf Deutsch zu stellen. Antje Louis wird so freundlich sein, die dann auch zu übersetzen. Das heißt, Sie müssen nicht die Frage auf Englisch stellen, wenn Sie es lieber auf Deutsch stellen möchten. Und Sie bekommen von mir wieder ein Mikro, wenn Sie Ihre Frage stellen. Bitte, gibt es eine Frage an Ruth bzw. an die europäische Delegation des IFSW?
Hello, nice to meet you.
Hello.
Both. It's an honor to have you here. My name is Nina. I'm studying international social work. And my question to you is, what do you think social workers all over the world, like what is going to be our role now that politics are moving so far to the right?
Did you want this? Okay. So what is our role now? Politics is moving so far to the right. I think our role in some ways needs to stay doing what we do. We need to hold on to the very best of what we do in terms of being that force for integration and collaboration and peace and understanding across peoples and cultures. To be that, to articulate that, to say those things is actually really powerful when you have politicians and others who are saying the opposite. In addition to that, I do think that organising more, working perhaps with other professions, but other institutions, to develop our narrative, develop our story, develop our narrative, develop our approach, and say why it is so important that social workers are there resolving issues with people, getting on side with people early, and what positive difference that makes in societies, and that there's no. So I think we in a way we just need to, it's like with everything, you have to take every bad opportunity and use it as an opportunity to every bad situation and try and turn it into an opportunity and be even more motivated to describe what we do and the importance of it. And I think social work leaders, like people who are organising associations, need to speak out. But everybody is a leader. Student leaders need to speak out as well. Educators need to speak out, and we need to support each other to do that because it's not easy, and we might feel at risk sometimes in doing that. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Gibt es noch eine Frage?
Auf dem Hintergrund der fürchterlichen Situation des Angriffskrieges von Russland gegen die Ukraine gibt es aktuell Austausch, wissend, dass es Projekte in der Ukraine gibt, die der IFSW macht. Gibt es Austausch mit der russischen Seite?
It's a really good point. So yes, my colleagues here have been very involved with work actually in Ukraine, which I'm sure many of you know, and some of those projects are ongoing and some have been completed. We need to keep having dialogue with our colleagues in the Russian Association. They have been part of the European region in the past, but they are now quite distant. And it's something that I think we, as within IFSW Europe, need to have conversations about how do we connect with them, because Russian people, Russian organisations who are not supportive of what's happened in Ukraine are in a very difficult situation themselves. I do some work with the Council of Europe, and Russia was thrown out of the Council of Europe when it invaded Ukraine. There's very strong reasons for that. But we have a lot of connection with Russian NGOs. Some have been closed down. International Memorial, which was the remembrance of the things that happened to people under Stalin, basically. That was closed down, and so I have a colleague who runs an anti-torture charity based in Russia, but an international one, under threat actually, has to constantly think about whether or not she is personally safe. So we do need to keep connected with social workers and other activists, human rights defenders in Russia. We need to, yeah. But at the moment, there's been a bit of a severance of communication, and it is complicated. I can't explain it in more detail, but very right to raise it. Thank you.
Gut, es gäbe noch die Möglichkeit, eine oder zwei Fragen. Einmal.
Thank you. It's just a short question. Do you have any experiences in the UK with social workers who are self-employed?
Yes, we have lots of them in my association. They are the biggest, they are the group that is growing the fastest at the moment. Almost 20% of our members are independent, as we call them. It means a number of different situations, but it's a very interesting group of people who do all sorts of extraordinary things, actually. Some people running their own not-for-profit organizations, some are running private companies, some are working for public sector, but on like a freelance basis. And they join our association to be very connected in with the mainstream of social work. They have to work to our ethical code. So we have a very strong relationship, and there are, in England in particular, not so much in the other nations, there are a lot of independents, and they work both in the UK and internationally.
Thank you very much.